Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, a little off the beaten path for us.
Right. Because usually when we talk about history on here, we talk about events. We talk about the dates, the major battles, the big treaties.
The structural stuff.
Exactly. But today, we're actually focusing on a person. And not just any person. We're talking about a figure who has sort of been turned into a statue. Literally and figuratively.
Well, you walk around London and you literally see the statues.
Oh, everywhere. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The bulldog face.
Yeah.
The cigar. The V for victory sign. Winston Churchill.
It's interesting you start with that statue image, because that really is how most of us encounter him, right? He is bronze, he's immovable, he's this legendary British lion.
The guy who saved the world.
Right. But the material we're diving into today, this short biography of his life that we're using as our source, it really doesn't give us the statue. It gives us something way messier.
Messier.
It gives us the actual human being.
And frankly, a much more interesting story for you to listen to. Because I think we have this tendency to look at great historical leaders and just assume they were born that way.
Like they came out of the womb giving rousing speeches and commanding armies.
Exactly. But the mission of this deep dive is going to shatter that illusion completely. We are looking at a trajectory that is honestly baffling when you really dig into it.
It really is. We are talking about a kid who hated school. A soldier who, a guy who failed his military entrance exams multiple times.
A politician who was completely washed up and rejected before he ever reached the mountaintop.
Right. So the goal today is to unpack the life of Winston Churchill based on this biographical source, but moving way beyond just the World War II highlight reel.
We want to trace that whole journey, from a struggling student in Woodstock, Oxfordshire, through the battlefields of South Africa, all the way to the highest office in the UK, and ultimately to a Nobel Prize. It's
quite a ride. And if there's one overarching theme that jumps out from this source material, what would you say it is?
Oh, man. Resilience, 100%.
Without a doubt.
The text explicitly frames his entire life around this concept of massive ups and downs. It's not a story of raw natural aptitude where, everything just came easy to him.
Right. It's a specific kind of stubbornness. In fact, the biography ends with a quote that I think we should just put on the table right now.
Oh, the continuous effort one.
Yeah. Quote, "Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential."
Continuous effort. It sounds so simple, but when you see what this guy actually went through, you realize that the word effort is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
A lot of heavy lifting. So let's get into it. Let's strip away the myth and look at the man. The biography starts at the very beginning, November 30th, 1874.
In Woodstock, Oxfordshire, England.
Right. A very specific, very grand setting. He's born into a family with a lot of status, which is crucial for understanding his psychology.
Yeah, let's look at the parents.
Yeah.
Because this is a classic power couple situation, right?
Absolutely. 19th century style.
His father is Lord Randolph Churchill. The source notes he was a prominent politician.
Very prominent, deep in the weeds of the Conservative Party, a man of real high status.
And his mother was Lady Randolph Churchill.
Who is a magazine editor.
Right, and that's a detail that I feel like often gets overlooked. But our source material highlights it for a very good reason.
It's an interesting blend of influences. You have this genetic cocktail, right? On one side, you have the high-stakes world of British politics from the father.
The speeches, the parliament, all that public service pressure.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have the world of media and publishing and editorial communication from the mother.
You can basically see the blueprint of Winston's future right there. He is the fusion of politics and journalism.
But having parents like that, parents with that much success and visibility, it creates a massive shadow for a kid.
Oh, totally. Imagine being the son of a famous lord and a sharp magazine editor. The expectations must have been astronomical.
You'd expect young Winston to be the golden child.
The valedictorian. The captain of the debate team.
You would. And you would be completely wrong.
Completely.
This is where the story gets super relatable for a lot of people, I think. The source explicitly describes him as a rebellious young boy.
A rebellious young boy who hated formal education. He didn't just dislike it.
No, he had...
It just wasn't a good fit for him at all.
And remember, in the late 19th century, formal education for a boy of his social class was extremely rigid.
Right.
It was Latin, it was Greek, it was mathematics, it was all about rote memorization and falling in line.
And Winston was just not having any of it.
Yeah.
The biography mentions he was sent to Harrow School.
Right, in April 1888.
Now, for you listening, if you aren't up on your elite British boarding schools, Harrow is a huge deal.
Massive. It's located near London. It's prestigious. It's essentially where you go to be groomed into a future prime minister or a general.
Theoretically, yes. But how did he actually do there?
The text is beautifully blunt about this. It says he, quote, did poorly there.
Did poorly. I love the understatement of that. This is the man who would later master the English language better than almost anyone in modern history.
Yeah.
And he is flunking his classes.
But here is the silver lining. The source points out this massive nugget of gold in all that academic mud.
Yeah.
While he was failing at the stuff he didn't care about, he developed a love for the English language.
Which is such a fascinating paradox. He's this quote-unquote bad student, but he's utterly obsessed with language.
Well, it's not really a paradox if you think about it deeply.
How so?
The standard curriculum at a place like Harrow was all about conformity.
Right, learning the rules.
Exactly. But language, English, that's about expression.
It's about communication.
It's about storytelling. So even at that young age, he's gravitating toward the exact tool that he would eventually use to change the world.
It does make you wonder, though, if he had been a model student, if he had just dutifully memorized his Latin and gotten straight A's, would he have developed that unique, rebellious voice?
I really doubt it. The rebellion was part of the package. He wasn't learning to pass a test, he was learning to use words as weapons.
Of course, at the time, nobody saw it that way. To his teachers, he was just a bad student.
And a disappointment, which is a really tough label for a kid to carry around.
So he scrapes through Harrow. He leaves in 1893.
Right, he's about 18 or 19 years old.
And he's obviously not going to Oxford or Cambridge because his grades are terrible. So what is the backup plan?
The military. Specifically, the Royal Military College at Sandhurst.
Which is basically the West Point of Britain.
It is. And this is where we hit the next major hurdle in the biography.
Right, because you'd assume, okay, school wasn't his thing, but he's an aggressive young aristocrat. The military should be a breeze.
You'd think he'd just walk right in.
He's a lord's son.
Not quite. The biography tells us he failed in his initial attempts to pass the entrance test.
Attempts. Plural.
Yes. He failed it twice.
Imagine that for a second. You've already done poorly at Harrow. Now you try to get into the army, which is sort of the traditional path for the less academic sons of the nobility, and you can't even get past the front door.
That had to be humiliating.
Crushing.
But this is the first real hard evidence we see of that continuous effort philosophy the text talks about.
Because he didn't quit.
No, he didn't. He didn't say, well, I guess I'll just go manage a country estate somewhere and give up. He crammed. He worked at it. He went back and took the test a third time.
And he passed.
He passed. He finally got selected. He graduated in December 1894.
And what was his commission? The source mentions he became a, quote, cornet second lieutenant in the 4th Queen's Own Hussars.
The Hussars. So he joined the British cavalry.
And there's a bit of context here that's interesting. The cavalry was the glamorous part of the army.
It was fast, it was dangerous, and it fit his personality perfectly. It was for these dashing young men.
So he's got the uniform. He's finally found his place. But he's not the kind of guy to just sit in the barracks in England and polish his boots.
No, he has an itch for action. The source says he traveled extensively to many places while with the military. He basically went looking for wars.
But he wasn't just a soldier, was he? And this goes right back to his mother's influence.
Right, the editorial side.
Yeah.
The text points out he was working as a newspaper correspondent.
This is the part that I think is absolute genius branding.
Oh, yeah.
He's on active duty, fighting for the British Empire.
Yeah.
But he's also freelancing for newspapers back in London.
Yeah.
He's writing stories about the battles that he is actively participating in.
Think about the control that gives him over his own narrative. He's not waiting for some historian or journalist to write about him. He's doing it himself in real time.
The soldier journalist.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful combination. It gives him visibility back home that other military officers his age just did not have.
He was building an audience because he had political ambitions. He knew the army was a stepping stone.
But before he could make that jump into politics, he needed a defining moment, something huge.
And that brings us to the incident in South Africa.
Right. Now, the source text places him in South Africa. And just a quick note, the text has a little temporal slip referencing the Second World War context here. But Historically, we know this South African event is happening right before 1900.
Exactly, during the Boer War period. So he's there as this correspondent and soldier, and things go very wrong.
The biography states it bluntly. Winston Churchill was captured and became a prisoner of war.
Just pause and think about that. He is locked up in a prison camp. For a guy with his restless energy and ambition, that must have felt like a death sentence.
To be stuck there, helpless, while the action is happening without him, he absolutely couldn't handle it.
So he does what you'd expect the rebellious kid from Harrow to do. He plans a break.
The source says he managed to escape from prison.
I love how casual that sounds. Managed to escape.
Right, like he just slipped out the back door. But this was incredibly high stakes. If he had been caught escaping, he could have been shot.
Easily. But he gets over the wall, and now he's out in enemy territory.
And the source highlights the journey. It says he traveled 300 miles to be rescued.
300 miles, that is a massive distance to cover when you are a wanted fugitive in a war zone, hiding out, trying not to be detected.
And when he finally makes it to safety, the reaction back home in Britain was electric.
The source says as a result, he became a hero in Britain for a while.
Fame is definitely fickle. But it was enough, right? This was the launch pad he needed.
It was the perfect catalyst. He went to South Africa as a young soldier journalist, and he came back as a national celebrity. The escaped prisoner, the hero.
And what do you do with that kind of fame when you're Winston Churchill? You cash it in for a political career.
You run for parliament.
So that takes us to part 4 of our deep dive. The year is 1900. The source notes he was elected to parliament,
Riding that wave of hero status right into the House of Commons.
And for the next 30 years or so, he is a fixture in British politics. The text mentions he held various offices, including a cabinet post in 1908.
But it also includes this incredibly telling phrase. It says his career had many ups and downs.
Ups and downs. That is putting it mildly.
Very mildly. Churchill was not a stable, safe politician.
No, he was a maverick.
He was volatile. He switched parties. He made decisions that completely backfired. There were times when he was considered a complete failure.
But amidst all this political chaos, he establishes a foundation in his personal life. The biography brings in Clementine
Hosier. They married on September 12th, 1908. He was 33.
We talk a lot about his resilience, but we really have to acknowledge hers too. Being married to Winston Churchill could not have been a calm experience.
Oh, it must have been exhausting, but she was his rock.
The source mentions they had 5 children. But it also hits us with a very sad detail. One child died young.
Yes. And I think it's important to pause on that, to humanize him. We see the big historical figure, but imagine dealing with the grief of losing a child.
Right. He was dealing with the crazy volatility of his career, cabinet posts, public scrutiny, while simultaneously carrying that deeply personal trauma.
It adds a lot of depth to his character. And interestingly, throughout all of this, the politics, the parenting, the grief, the source, reminds us that he became famous for his writings.
He never stopped being a writer.
Never. Even while navigating Parliament, he kept writing. And that kept his voice sharp.
He was constantly honing that command of the English language that he found back at school.
Exactly.
So we move through the 1920s and into the 1930s. And this is where the global stage gets really dark.
This is the pre-World War II context.
Right. At the outbreak of World War II, the source notes he became First Lord of the Admiralty, which gave him command of the Royal Navy.
But to understand how he got there, we have to look at the political conflict happening right before the war.
The antagonist of this chapter in British politics is the current Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain.
And our source is very clear on Chamberlain's strategy. It states he wanted to appease Germany and Hitler.
Appeasement. Now, we should be clear. We're just reporting what the text outlines here. The government's position was essentially, if we give Hitler some of what he wants, maybe we can avoid a massive conflict.
Right. The trauma of World War I was still very fresh. People wanted peace at almost any cost.
But Churchill, according to the source, knew appeasement wouldn't work.
He saw right through it.
He warned the government. He basically said, you have to fight Hitler now, or Hitler will take over all of Europe.
Imagine being the guy shouting that warning when everyone else is desperate to believe that peace is possible.
It takes a lot of stubbornness, holding that highly unpopular opinion that war is the only necessary path.
But then the tide turns. The source tells us Germany continued to advance.
Hitler didn't stop. And as a result, the country lost confidence in Chamberlain.
The policy of appeasement completely collapsed.
And when you realize you're heading into a brutal fight, You don't want the guy who promised you peace. You want the guy who was warning you to get ready.
So Chamberlain resigns. And on May 10th, 1940, Winston Churchill is chosen as his successor.
He becomes prime minister. And there is a detail here I really want to emphasize because it blew my mind.
His age?
Yes, he was 65 years old.
65.
I mean, think about that. For most people, 65 is when you retire. You get your gold watch, you go relax.
And for Churchill, it was the start of the biggest, most stressful job of his entire life.
And the situation he walked into was a nightmare. The source points out that immediately after he became PM, Germany invaded France.
The situation deteriorated instantly.
And then the text hits us with this chilling reality. Britain was alone in Europe fighting Hitler.
Alone. France falls. The U.S. isn't in the war yet. The Soviet Union isn't fighting Germany yet. It is just Britain against this massive, terrifying war machine.
So what is Churchill's role in this impossible situation?
Well, the source explicitly highlights his ability to inspire. It says he inspired the country to keep fighting despite the bad circumstances.
This goes right back to Harrow again. His weapon was the English language. He used his speeches to hold the country together when the military situation looked completely hopeless.
But inspiration alone doesn't win a global war. You need strategy and you need friends.
Right. And the text points out he helped forge the Allied powers with the Soviet Union and the United States. And now the U.S. alliance makes total sense, but the Soviet Union, that was a massive ideological conflict for him.
Huge. The source makes it very clear Churchill did not like Joseph Stalin or the communists.
He despised them, honestly.
But this is where you see his sheer pragmatism. The text notes he knew the Allies needed their help to fight Germany.
It's the ultimate example of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. He put aside his deep personal and political hatred for Stalin to achieve the greater goal, which was defeating Hitler.
He held his nose and made the deal. And it worked.
It did. The source wraps up the war years by stating that with Allied help and Churchill's leadership, the British held off Hitler and defeated the Germans after a long and brutal war.
Victory. He leads them through their darkest hour to total victory. You'd think he'd be prime minister for life after that.
You would. But history loves a plot twist.
And this is a massive one. The biography says that immediately after the war, Churchill's party lost the election and he was no longer prime minister.
It is wild to think about.
Winning the biggest war in human history and getting voted out of office almost immediately. How does that happen?
Well, the source frames his whole career as having ups and downs, and the public simply felt that the man who was perfect for leading a war wasn't necessarily the man to rebuild the country in peacetime.
It's a brutal kind of rejection.
But again, the resilience kicks in. Did he retire after that shock defeat?
No. The text says he remained a major leader in government.
He stayed in the fight.
And remarkably, he was elected prime minister again in 1951.
Serving for many more years before finally retiring, the continuous effort just never stopped.
Which leads us to the final chapter of his legacy. And this is my favorite detail in the whole source material.
The Nobel Prize.
Yes. In 1953, he is awarded a Nobel Prize. But not for peace.
No, for literature.
He won the Nobel Prize in literature.
It's just incredible. It brings the entire narrative full circle right back to that rebellious boy who failed his formal education, but loved the English language.
He nurtured that one specific passion his entire life, through his journalism, his books, his speeches, and ultimately that is what the world recognized him for at the highest level.
It's a profound validation of his specific genius.
The biography notes his timeline ends on January 24th, 1965.
Yeah.
He died in Kensington, London at the age of 90.
90 years of a profoundly huge life.
So looking back at this entire arc, the rebellious student, the failed exam taker, the escaped prisoner, the lone warning voice, the war leader, the defeated politician, the returning prime minister, and the Nobel laureate.
It all comes back to that core philosophy from the text.
Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential.
He wasn't the smartest student. He wasn't physically the strongest guy. But his effort was absolutely continuous. He just refused to stop.
He outworked and outlasted his failures.
Exactly.
So we've covered the source material, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you listening with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on what we've discussed today.
I think the biggest takeaway is looking at his flaws.
Right. Think about this. If Churchill had been a quote-unquote good student, if he had fit perfectly into that formal education box at Harrow and learned to follow the rules and seek consensus.
If he had been agreeable.
Exactly. If he had been an agreeable rule follower, Would he have developed the rebellious streak and the sheer stubbornness required to stand completely alone against the Axis powers in 1940?
It's a great question.
A reasonable, consensus-driven politician probably would have negotiated with Hitler when things looked bleak. It took someone unreasonable to keep fighting.
So perhaps his early failures and his inability to conform were actually the most essential ingredients for his ultimate success.
Maybe the very things that made him a bad student are what made him the leader the world needed when everything was on the line. Just something to think about next time you feel like you're failing to fit the mold.
That's a great perspective to leave on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.